Yes, that's right. It's Let's Talk. Call-in radio. This is KWMR 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas. And what else?
92.3 in the San Geronimo Valley.
Streaming live at all times on KWMR.org. And this is Let's Talk, getting to the root causes of important issues of the day. On the Air community forum that welcomes your voices, because usually we know next to nothing about the subject we're talking about, and we want to hear the collective wisdom of the community at large. And so your hosts today, at the controls, by default,
Shelley Rugg.
Shelley Rugg. Stephen Horowitz is here.
And speak for yourself about not knowing anything.
Oh, excellent. We have an expert in the room. And I'm Paul Raffel. The topic. Let me just fill you in on the topic. First of all, it's women's unpaid work.
Aha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I do know nothing about that.
And I think we all know what that means. So the call-in number is 415-663-8492 or 8317. When you call in, you'll hear a little funny noise as Shelley puts you in the system. Wait until she says you're on the air, and then give us any name. Turn your radio down, and please, watch your language. Keep it clean. This is live radio. So, yes, women's unpaid work. I'm kind of shocked that this is still a topic, really, in the Me Too days and all. But there was something popped up in my email box. It's actually from it's the Representation Project, which is Gavin Newsom's wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom. Feminist organization, activist organization. She makes films. And this was the lead article. It was about how men are still not helping enough around the house, that there's inequality in the house, in the home, and the chores that are delegated to each other, to partners. And women end up doing most of the stuff themselves, in addition, these days, to having a full-time job as well.
Right. I was going to say, nowadays it needs to be a two-income earning family to meet the cost of living these days.
Exactly. So I really thought, men are not. I mean, you vacuum, you clean, right,
I do.
Stephen?
Yeah, I'm the housekeeper.
You cook.
Yeah,
You're the housekeeper there.
I am.
Yeah.
And, I think it's totally underrated.
Yeah. What's that, housekeeping?
Yeah, I just think homemaking in general, I think it can be very creative.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So you enjoy it?
I do.
Well, there it is.
Okay. Dishes can be very meditative if you approach it right.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to cook. Cooking is creative.
Yeah.
The children are grown, so I don't have child care to worry about. But
flickering lights in the studio.
But I want to get back. I don't know why you're surprised that these subjects are still being talked about. There has been so little change, really, socially. It's just not surprising to me that this is still...
Really, it's still the thing where women are supposed to do the housework and raise the kids. And
West Coast thinking.
Oh, I see. Well, that's...
Well, traditions die hard, I think, is part of it. What did our mother do in the house? What did our grandmother do in the house? We have memories of that, and we connect with it, and it can be a guidepost, but...
It's certainly an old trope, as they say, an old scenario where the breadwinner comes home and just slumps in the chair, opens a beer, and turns on TV while his wife cooks dinner and puts the kids to bed and all that stuff. Is that,
for couples who are somewhat wealthy, I suppose they could both do that, crack the beer, put their feet up, and have their maid take care of it.
Exactly.
So, you have to earn enough money to hire a housekeeper.
Well, there's the thing. So most people are not earning enough money to hire a housekeeper.
Right.
And most people these days have to have dual incomes in a household to actually be able to live in a house anymore.
Yeah.
And with children, it's that's a whole nother subject.
The fact that apparently there's a research that I found in which women are still doing 65% of the housework, while men are, they do the cool stuff with the kids. They'll take them on exciting rides
to the
amusement
parks and stuff,
or giving them bows and arrows or whatever.
Oh yeah, you're so cool idealized.
Stuff. And they, mom is still inside. The guys
we have
are
a caller.
We have a caller.
Yes, caller, you are on the air. Please tell us your name.
My name is Charles.
Hi, Charles.
Shelley, my darling, how are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for asking.
By the way, the dishes aren't going to wash themselves, so when you're done with the radio show... I think, Shelley, you hit on something really interesting, which is, and I'm going to try and do this as quickly as possible. If you go back 200 years to, say, a rural farm in England, you would find that all the activities that allowed the husband and wife and their children to survive were shared. If a woman spun wool, a man wove it. If a man plowed a field, his wife would be planting with her children behind them. All the things they did were cooperative activities that cumulatively allowed them to survive. Now, what you have with industrialization is that now you're off the land. You've forgotten how to feed yourself or make your clothes or whatever it is you do. All of those skills are gone. You're in an urban environment. And now all of your relationship to reality, like how you survive now, is based on the wage. And the man, certainly in the United States, although obviously a lot of women in factories going back hundreds of years as well, now the man has all the money. And the money is your relationship to survival. It's all the stuff that you have to buy now, the heat and the rent and the food. And it's in this scenario where you get, I think, what feminism in the 20th century was such a big reaction to, which is the breadwinner, as Paul was saying, now becomes the master who controls that relationship in terms of how everyone in the household survives. And that's, I think, where you get the abuse, the domination by men of women within relationships or of their children as well. It's caused by this change in the relationship to survival itself. So the idea that, some hostility or disrespect of men for women is eternal, I don't think there's a very good case for that. I think there's a much better case for the way the economy changed in the last 150 years, put one person in charge of, entirely in control of the means to survive.
Right.
Shelley, your point, which is, now, liberated yet, ladies? Now women can be in that same, I think, really awful relationship to the economy. Now, remember those men in the factories, this is alienated work. This is brutal work. They're dominated by their bosses. They're a constant sort of threat of being fired. And then, of course, the work itself is demoralizing and degrading. And they bring all that home.
Yeah.
Now women are free to be similarly alienated and degraded. I have an old girlfriend who lives in San Francisco as a corporate lawyer. I was never going to be a corporate lawyer. That's the best trick men played on women with feminism. It's fantastic. Now they think it's an achievement to be some corporate schlep, and that's like you got something. No,
I totally agree with you.
So I think that what men and women have to do, and they have to do it cooperatively, is get back to that thing in which you work together in order to figure out how to survive with dignity, and do it as a shared activity. Not I go off and make my money, you go off and you make your money, and if you make enough, well then you can enslave other people, servants, to do the dishes, clean and all, and feed you, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a complex problem. And the solution is not women in the workplace. All that is men is that women are now free to be exploited in the same way men have been for 100 years now. And I don't think it makes them very happy, and I don't think it solves any of our problems.
Yeah, and especially when you look at the fact that women can be doing the same job as a man in the industries and be paid much less.
I think that, Germaine Greer, the Australian feminist, said women could have marched in the 60s and 70s till their feet fell off. The reason that, quote-unquote, rights were extended to women was deliberately to get them into the workforce, to bring the cost of labor down, to dilute the labor pool so that workers' rights would be less. So the irony being that women who are going off and saying, these avenues of professional activity have been denied women, I want to now be the lawyer, the doctor, the this, the that, the other thing. Greer would say there's a dark side to that, and the dark side is that corporations' interest in diluting the labor pool and their interest in thereby reducing the rights of workers.
Yeah.
That's an interesting perspective. I think, as a woman, I wouldn't have thought of that. I would have thought, by being able to work and earn a living wage, I don't have to be under the thumb of a man. I think that's kind of a big part of it is, the feeling that you don't have power in a relationship, that you don't have power in a community, that you're less than. And, certainly we're looking at that very thing right now in America, 2019, women being designated as less than.
Sure.
In so many ways, but it's scary.
It's like what you're saying, though, is that feminism played into the corporate hand. I'm not sure that corporations were behind feminism, but that feminism actually caused wages to drop.
They've conspired with their own exploitation, and they call it freedom, and that's what makes it so insidious.
Right.
Because remember, that man who's in the workplace is exploited as well.
Yeah.
And so merely saying, I want the right to be exploited in the same way is a limited dream, I would say.
Yeah, but, there is something to be said for having your own money in your own pocket.
Yeah, it gives you the ability to, if you have to leave.
Right.
If there's no way you can stay, you can leave, and you may not be able to afford a one-bedroom.
Yeah, because it used to be that the whole marriage contract was about women taking care of the household. Right. The man goes and earns the money, and the woman is dependent on that man. And the whole divorce situation then causes the man to have to pay alimony, right? Yeah. Because that woman is not able to support herself.
I think what I was mentioning, though, is I think homework, working in the home is underrated. I think that, raising my children, I did spend a lot of time at home being, personally in charge of my own income. I think that raising the kids, that was some of the nicest time of my life. I really enjoyed being around children. And sure, there are all sorts of sides to that activity, but to say that this is a lesser activity, I just don't buy that.
I agree with you, Stephen. It's absolute foolishness. We've come to despise the home because of the alienation of the workplace itself. You don't inhabit it. You don't know your wife. You don't raise your children. Your conscious life is spent outside of that home doing a job that's really miserable. Although, in the Bay Area, it comes with all these perks. Everything's dressed up here. It's a lot easier to describe this in Flint, Michigan than it is here because people say, well, look at all this amazing cheese, and I'm rich. But I think that's true. My mother was a professional, and I'm very proud of some of the professional accomplishments that she achieved.
You brought up something, though, that's right on, and that is poverty makes a big difference.
She will say today that she wanted to raise her children. She did not want to have to work outside of the house all the time.
Right.
And that's something that we have trouble grappling with. Easy for her to say, I guess, but very difficult for other people. But yeah, I think we're all, our relationship to work is really toxic. and it has polluted the relationship between the sexes. And
families.
And that should be our focus. The way that these things are presented popularly is that you can't do anything about the economy, and so let's just focus on treating the symptoms of the toxicity of the way that we have to survive. And so that's why we have a conversation about should women be paid for housework or not be paid, or how should men and women relate to each other, never dealing with the fundamental issue, which I think is problematic. And now, I'd like to plug my show tomorrow night. I
Cut him off.
by Michael Tiger, famous lawyer and Bullitt Hall grad. I got an email from Lyons about Tiger. It was unbearable. And if you want to listen at 9 a.m., that is when it will be. Paul Bell should be there, but it's abandoning.
But I shan't be because I'm a wage slave.
Well, wage slavery is a real thing. Everyone thinks of it as natural, like the way that the grass grows. It's an economy that's developed based on decisions by human beings, and we can change it. And I think if we do change it, you will see that the potential for men and women to cooperate and to understand each other more fully and to work together, that realm of possibility for those kinds of things will open up if we can deal with the way in which we're all victims of the economy as it exists.
Charles, you're romantic.
Oh, very.
Hey, you are listening to Let's Talk on KWMR 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley. And if you'd like to get in on this conversation, please call 415-663-8492 or 8317.
I'd like to get in on the conversation.
Well, I think it's interesting that you said that we can change the economy. What are you thinking?
Yeah, really. What are the solutions here, mister?
That's obviously a very complicated question, which would take lots and lots of time, but that's a good thing, especially for you, listener.
Oh, wait.
You can read, I want to plug Rebecca Solnit's new book, Charles Explains Things to Me. I would just say that minimizing your need for cash and trying to open up time, because time is your consciousness. If you sell all of your time, then you really have sold your consciousness to some corporation, whatever it is.
Yep.
And so the way to draw back from a lifestyle that requires a cash burn, I'll call it, that means that you need to be constantly engaged in wage work or making money. And I could talk about different ways in which that could happen, but I think it's kind of a maybe too long conversation, and MK hasn't called yet. And
Well,
again, that's people are pushed to the edge. If you're in Flint, Michigan, I see people who are at the edge, working at Taco Bell with a phone payment, a car payment, a rent payment, all of which they're one check away from being behind on.
Yeah, paycheck to paycheck.
That's 80% of the American, 78% of the population.
And it doesn't look like it's going to get any better anytime soon, especially with all of the robots that are going to take over everybody's jobs.
Yeah.
But that's good, because robots should be doing those jobs, because they rob people of their dignity. I got to tell you, in Flint, Michigan, people like Robert Reich over there in Inverness, he and a lot of people really fetishize the period in American history from about 1945 to 1965. They say how many people were employed, buying houses for the first time, being able to send their kids to college for the first time, all of these economic benefits. That work itself, that factory work, say, building automobiles in Flint, Michigan, was really degrading. Levels of substance abuse and domestic abuse that came out of that formula, that you're going to rivet a metal nonstop for 10 hours.
The same rivet in the same hole over and over and over and over again.
And degrading work for men.
And pollution, let's not forget, too.
Well, I have an issue with Rosie the Riveter. You built the Enola Gay. Thanks a lot, ladies. Again, that was, I think, pernicious. And I don't say that anyone's doing this consciously, but it's pernicious to say, oh, we can do it. We can do what? We can build war machines?
Well, we can certainly do that.
You can build automobiles. I mean,
well, that's the whole patriotism thing. Kind of is a way of marketing. Being on board with the plan, whatever it is.
And like I say, I think women are really badly served by this because it's taking our idealization of the feminine and bending it to a corporate agenda, to an imperial agenda, to a war agenda, and telling those women that unless you engage in these activities, then you're not a real person. You're not as good as a man. So, like I say, my poor friend that is a corporate lawyer in San Francisco, by the way, just surviving there, right? So you're just surviving working fast food in the Midwest. You're just surviving as a corporate lawyer in San Francisco. It sounds amazing to say, but it's true there too. But placed in a position where, again, I've encountered so many women, they have very strong desire, of course it's biological, but even beyond that, to have children, to have a partner. But they don't have time.
Right.
And they can't really be a woman unless they sell all of their time to a corporation. And so they're in this insane double bind, and I think they're really unhappy. And again, by Rebecca Solnit's book, Charles Explains Things to Me. The details. But thank you so much for having the call.
Charles
Splaining.
Me on, and good luck.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you for calling, Charles.
Take care.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
I get to ramble again.
That's great. Yes, of course, the system. Of course, the entire predatory capitalist system that's doing us all in and continuing the wars, all that.
A lot of the what you talk about, the tedious jobs, we've exported them to China.
Yeah, exactly.
Who actually corporations are content to let them work under slave-like conditions.
Sure.
But if you're living paycheck to paycheck, how different is that from slavery if you're working at a job you don't like? Really,
wage slavery. Yeah.
Right.
So the one of the ideas 40 years ago now, back in the 70s, women getting paid for work. It was a Marxist feminist organization, Europe and the U.S. and elsewhere, South America, I think, about paying women for those extra hours that they spend working every day, while men back then were doing maybe 20% of the housework and the rearing of the children, spending their time with kids and family in the house. So the idea was spawned that maybe you could pay women in the workplace, mothers basically in the workplace, for example, a 34-hour week and still pay them the same salary.
Where's the money coming from to pay them?
From the companies that they work for.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the man works for GM and the GM...
The man works a 40-hour week and gets paid for it. The woman works a 34-hour week and gets paid the same, even though she's working 6 hours fewer at the office, but is going home and doing at least 6 more hours a week, just keeping home and family together. And maybe that would free them up for childcare. They wouldn't have to pay for childcare so much. They could maybe have an hour or two a day where the mother was there and looking after the kids, or vice versa.
I guess it's hard for me
or the men doing
to imagine the business owner
exactly
going for that idea, because it would be like, well, why am I having to pay her to be at home being a housewife for a few hours
Because she would be happier. Mm-hmm. She would be more alert. She would be more sane. She would be less depressed. She would be harboring fewer grudges against her husband and against her company.
What if it was flipped? Like Stephen was saying, how much he enjoyed being at home and doing the housework and all of that.
Yes.
So could the same be true, where the woman could work 40 hours and the man work less?
Of course, and it would be about the skills of the people involved. Stephen obviously is a skilled homemaker and a parent.
Well,
maybe that was not the mother's.
Well, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time, having gone through one phase to denigrate homework. Maybe it's time now to give it more of its due. I think any of these jobs that we're talking about is that we've stripped the creativity of the human of what we're doing, and I think that in the home, there's more opportunity for creativity. And if you just make a deal where one person's clean and the other person's neat, you can
neat. Well, and this brings up same-sex couples, right? Mm-hmm. They don't do it along gender lines. They do it along... Well, so this is interesting. So they do it along skill lines. Who has the talent? Who wants to cook? Who enjoys cooking? Who enjoys cleaning? Okay, you do that. I'll do what I'm good at.
Yeah.
And they find that balance until they have children.
Interesting.
And then suddenly things tend to change, and someone is doing all the rearing, and maybe both of them want to be doing the child rearing.
Interesting. We do have a caller.
Yep.
Caller, you are on the air. Let us know your name.
Well, I'm responding to Charles.
Thanks for calling, MK.
Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm thinking that maybe the value system is wrong. That it all seems to be what you're saying. It seems to be based on money, and there are so many other ways of having value, like having successful children because you, by some grace of God or whoever, you got lucky and did it right, and followed your instincts and I'm talking about myself, obviously, that I went to work full time when my youngest child was 2.5 because he was verbal and toilet trained and ready. He was ready for it. So I went, and then the husband went away because he asked me one day if I would like it if he left, and I said yes, and he left. Seriously. And so he left, and that was because it was a mismatch. It was an uncomfortable, unpleasant, dangerous, self-destructive kind of situation. So I got out of that. Then I went to work. I had no money. Just really, but we had a great time. And I wouldn't trade those. I mean, even when the kids had chicken pox for 5 weeks, and I read them Gone with the Wind. I mean, the little dumb stuff like that, where you are there and you're close and that is of such great value. And I never crossed my mind to get paid money for doing what is a natural process.
Well, so yes.
Am I wrong? I mean, I don't think...
No, wrong, no. A natural process. There's there's certainly motherhood. It's a sanctified thing in this country, isn't it?
Here he goes again.
No, isn't it? Though?
No, I'm just kidding.
Our mothers are the saints. Yeah. But you say you had no money, but you had a roof over your head somehow.
Right.
So
I had enough money to seriously squeak by. I mean, we became extremely inventive and had a garden and did all of these things, but I didn't ever feel like there was this big old weight on my shoulders that I was supposed to do something. It just seemed a natural thing to do.
Right. Well, of course.
And I didn't resent it because what to resent? I don't know.
Well,
I'm Pollyanna cowgirl here.
But did you didn't have a partner at the time? You'd left him.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, of course.
I didn't want one.
It was your choice.
It was going to be like that, and I also,
fantastic,
for some weird reason, wanted to do it my way.
So your former spouse had no interest in spending time with the children?
Very little.
Because in this society today, I don't know now, but it used to be that in a divorce situation, the husband was really second-class citizen. He had to...
Sure, the mother gets a visitation. Yeah,
right, he had to schedule his time with the kids.
Yeah.
And very limited.
But he really didn't. He was off on some quest of something.
Well, I'm talking about in general.
At the bar.
This is like this is like the perfect situation for you then, really. I mean, you were.
It was, and I got lucky.
Yeah.
Because nobody got seriously injured. We had some broken bones and flu and some pneumonia and stuff like that. But that's kind of like life.
And there wasn't some guy in your way all the time and doing things wrong.
I did have lovers. I did have lovers. But
Well,
All right.
of course you did.
scheduled too, you know.
Well, you are listening to KWMR in Point Reyes Station. This is Let's Talk with Paul Raffel, Stephen Hurwitz, and myself, Shelley Rugg. And we are talking about the value of women's work. Or
Unpaid work.
The undervalued, unpaid work of women.
Well, so yes, I think that's the ideal situation you were in. I can't find anything.
Well, no, I looking back. I mean, it was a much simpler time. The kids could run free in the neighborhoods and not worry about the sort of predatory things that are happening now. And we didn't live in a big city. We lived in Tacoma, but it was out in the boonies, you know.
Yeah, lovely.
Woods and fields and stuff. And I never was a controlling mother. I see these mothers these days, and I understand why they have to be more controlling, because it's not safe. The world is a dangerous place. And I was very, very lucky. So anyway, I don't think that I needed to be paid money for doing what I'd chosen to do, which is to have kids and
But then,
have fun.
in a way, women, single mothers, for example, who are raising kids and can't afford to pay rent, they get benefits from the state. What's it called?
General assistance.
General assistance.
Called WIC.
So that's kind of being paid for.
Well, yeah, you're getting subsidized, kind of. You know, I never went that rent. And actually, to be perfectly honest, I knew in my heart of hearts that if I got really in trouble, there's family to bail me out.
Yeah,
But I didn't call on them.
No.
Only once, when a tree fell down on our electric lines and our house had a gray out or a brown out or whatever it was, we were going to be burned up.
Well, you know, that
So
brings
I
up
asked my
something.
parents for money to rewire, and they did, and they gave it to me, and that was that. But we were expected to make our own way and figure it out.
That's great.
You know, you bring up something, though, that
A lot of people will really be mad at me for saying all this, but that's the way it is.
Oh, really?
what do you mean?
Call in.
No, I think I sounds like the perfect situation for you and the kids.
Yeah, it was good.
Congratulations.
I guess, I think, what occurred to me was that what we're looking at is more of a relationship problem or a relationship issue, right? So
I think you're right.
You could be a stay-at-home wife, mother, or a stay-at-home husband, and your other partner works, and it could work out really well for both parties if you have good communication. Then you can work it out, and you can feel good about your contribution to that relationship. But I think there's a lot of women who aren't able to find their voice in relationships, and
I think that's true. That's true.
Unfortunate.
Yeah. And, I suppose the men could also have that problem. We all, as human beings, can be really afraid to tell our truths to each other.
Well, it's risky.
Yeah.
You get misunderstood. You get, you can be out on your derriere in the street.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, it is. The homeless population attests to that.
I just want to add something to this conversation.
There are a lot of really great people out there that just have had bad luck.
I'd like to add something to the conversation, and that is, you mentioned family, and I think that something that Charles didn't cover, and I think it has to be thrown into the mix, is that traditionally families live very close to each other. I know Gail's family, for many years, they all lived within a 2-block radius of each other, and I think that there's a real support system that is missing today. I think back then there just were so many ways that a person, had that safety net. And I think in more traditional families, maybe people who are coming over from Mexico, etc. I mean, even in the care of the elderly, it wasn't people didn't think, we're going to send mom to an assisted living. The assisted living situation is at home,
Right?
And and it's possibly a more positive experience. I don't know.
Well, Stephen, that my family, I lived here on this coast, and my family all lived in Massachusetts and Maine and New Hampshire. And I came to the West Coast because my husband at that point got a job out here, but also because I couldn't live within the constraints of that family. I knew that I would be defeated.
Well, that's a whole different story.
I was different from them, and I didn't fit. That's the mistaken zygote again, and so it was healthier for me to have a good big fat distance between me and the family, because I think I became more accessible in the abstract, I guess, one way to put it. So I saw them once or twice a year, and that was all fine, and I lived my own life, which was completely different from theirs on this coast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, I remember when I was getting to the age where I could potentially get married, I always held this position that I didn't need to get married, and I didn't, that wasn't something important to me. But then when I decided to have kids, I felt like, well, I should get married for the benefit of the kids somehow. But
it's just easier to explain, Shelley.
Yeah,
Where's
the last
your
name thing.
husband?
But, I think ultimately we have to remind ourselves that we have the power over the course of our lives to a certain degree, and we have to be willing sometimes to have a rough patch in order to get to a better place. And
because you don't know how much better the better place is unless you have the rough patch.
Well, there's that.
I've never heard so much idealization as coming out of this last 38 minutes in my life.
To me, that's the reality of my life, Stephen. I don't know about you, but I've always steered my ship away from troubled waters and towards somewhere else I'd rather be.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Very good.
Yay for us.
Yay for you.
Okay, well, let somebody else call in.
Thank you, MK.
Thanks, MK. Bye-bye.
Boost up, Stephen. Bye.
Bye. Yes, if you'd like to call in, the numbers to call are 415-663-8492 or 8317 on KWMR in Point Reyes Station.
Shelley, I was just confessing that I'm the one that was idealizing.
Oh.
So there's the article that brought this to my attention was also not just the other one, the Siebel Newsom one. What good dads get away with, and it's about how the culture of fatherhood, the perception of fatherhood has changed, but the actual involvement of the fathers has not changed so much. And there are she interviewed, she's a psychologist, and she interviewed all these couples, and the woman would say things like, oh, he doesn't change diapers. I can't trust him to do anything to actually remember things, like she'll be arranging child care for some holiday for the kids, right? And he won't even know it's happening until the day of. Oh, the kids aren't in school today, right? It's that kind of. Apparently, it's still going on. The other men, the other fathers and husbands are saying, "Oh, well, I do things, but only when she tells me that I should be doing it." I don't mind cleaning, but I just don't see it. Or I do my laundry, and then she has to tell me when it's time to do the kids' laundry.
Well, yeah, again, it sort of comes back to a relationship problem.
Yeah.
Our willingness to talk about hard things. Like when you take the kids to the market, don't let them stand up in the cart, because it will tip over. Sorry you had to find out the hard way.
Yeah.
We have something in our house called the morning meeting, and at 9 o'clock the alarm goes off, and it's time for the morning meeting, and we sit down and we talk about our day and what we're going to be up to. And Gail talks about all the things that she has to do, and I'm going to whatever.
I'll be cooking dinner.
And so, in that sense, like you said, it's a relationship problem, communication, and communication. You know, we talk about the dads. It needs to be factored in. It needs to be scheduled.
Well, and it's family history, too. You know, we know what we grew up with. And if we grew up in a household where the man comes home and puts his feet up and drinks the beer and the woman caters to him, we think that's how it's supposed to be.
Well, my
whether you're the woman or the man.
My family, my parents, one-income household. My dad worked in the city of London and took the train and bus in every morning, came back every night, 6:30, and Mom would have dinner waiting for him. I mean, she was certainly. And then once my brother and I were more independent, once we were teenagers, and she went off and did volunteer work all over the place. But
yeah.
Would you call her an unhappy woman with that situation?
No, I think that's what she signed up for. I mean, that's what she expected.
You know, you're as happy as you allow yourself to be. Looks like we have a caller.
What about this home ec classes? When I was a kid, it seemed that it valued that kind of work. Though was something that did they have home ec for boys? You know,
I think boys took wood shop.
I was going to say we had
and the
shop.
Girls did not.
We had shop.
They called it domestic science in Britain. Domestic science for girls.
Well, we have a caller. Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
My name is David.
Hi, David. Thanks for calling.
You're welcome. Thank you for being there. My mind kind of wanders toward maybe an idealized version of ancient history, but the way a lot of societies were arranged and proceeded for thousands and thousands of years. And as I said, this is maybe idealized or romanticized or something, but the men went out and beat around the bushes for raccoons and lions and things like that to bring home food.
Yep.
And over the next period of time, the women took care of that, of preparing the food, making the food, and incidentally being there to raise the children. And the children were, engaged in taking care of, quote, the house, unquote. And at a certain point, the boys kind of followed the men off to work, and the girls stayed home.
What? The men worked, but the women just stayed home.
Yeah, well, traditionally, yeah.
I didn't mean that in any
traditional
culture way like that.
But you're really describing a hunting-gathering group in a sense.
Well, no. I just re-described what Paul just outlined. His dad went off to work and beat around in the bushes for whatever business he was in, and the mom stayed home and prepared the food, and when he got home, bringing home a few raccoons or something, opossums, perhaps.
Well, so...
and
no, possum again.
Okay, so I may be totally wrong about this, but this is kind of the impression that I've gotten over the years.
So, and that is still going on around the world. I mean, we're just talking about America here, but around the world, this is the same problem. There are women who are doing unpaid work all day, supporting the house, the family that they have, raising the kids, going for water, going
even
to get
earning
food,
the money,
getting food, gathering food, doing everything, lighting the fire, cooking, and the man comes home. So that's still happening.
Food too?
What's that? Yeah, well, they gather the food. They go and they
go shopping.
Well, no, they go in
the garden.
Well,
in the garden.
What the men did was they went out and gathered the food.
Well, so hunter-gatherer society is an interesting thing. Yes, men would go out and hunt, and I think it's something like a ridiculous amount of time. 90% of the time, they would come back empty-handed. So the women, fortunately, had been out all day as well, gathering roots and vegetables, and
nuts and berries,
nuts and berries, and there was still something to eat. So yeah, it's always been unequitable. I mean, the UN did a study on this whole thing about women's unpaid work and how it enslaves them and makes inequalities throughout society even worse. Because they don't feel worthy, and men don't treat them as worthy of anything else other than what they do, and they don't get paid for it, and they can't get out of it.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yes, David.
I somehow we're not translating well. I mean, in a society that I described, where the men went out and 10% of the time they came home with the bacon.
Right.
But nobody was getting paid any more or any less than anybody else.
Right.
I mean, I may be wrong about that. I'm totally open to that. But it seems like that's the way the society, the family, it was an extended family, or maybe it was a tribe taking a village to make this all happen. But nobody had any economic advantage over anybody else.
Right. In those societies, then if we're talking about just cash, I mean, yes, of course, hunter-gatherer societies, no. But let's see. Relative to women, men spend the most time doing chores in Scandinavian countries and the least time in India, Mexico, Turkey, and Japan. In Norway, for instance, women spend just over 3.5 hours a day on unpaid work, and men spend 3 hours. Very equitable. In India, women spend 6 hours a day, and men spend less than an hour. So the men come home from whatever they've been doing and do their Indian equivalent of sitting in the lazy boy and turning on the TV. Anyway, it's built in. It's a built-in thing to humanity, I think.
What's a built-in thing?
Well, this whole, the woman is the mother and stays at home and looks after the kids, and the guy goes out and does whatever he does all day, maybe brings some of the money back if he doesn't booze it away. And we're still living with that. And maybe if women in the workplace has done, as Charles said, played into the hands of corporations being able to pay less to everybody because they're diluting the male workplace with females who don't expect to be paid as much until recently, right?
We didn't know, possibly.
That's what I was going to say. They didn't know they were getting paid less.
Right. Well, we have another caller.
Okay, I'm going to slide.
Hey,
Thank you, David.
All right, thanks for calling.
Afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Caller, you are on the air. What's your name?
Well, I'm just here to conjure some magic. I called for MK, and she appeared.
You are fabulous.
I would like to say Greta Pullen, whose old acquaintance Peter Sellers is putting on a new production in San Francisco. Peter Sellers, the director.
Sellars.
Yeah, not
Peter Sellars.
So, Greta, I think if you're listening, you ought to call in. But I'd say, Paul's overwhelming misanthropy is in evidence yet again. But I think that, and I have this on reliable authority, that men like women, and even the other way around, and that we need to figure out ways to engage in cooperative activities. Again, that man who goes off to the job is alienating. The job is unpleasant, and they bring that unpleasantness home with them, and it's not right to take out the things that happen to you out in the world back into your home and take them out on your wife or children. But that is the reality, and that job is what needs to be fixed. The answer isn't, oh, no, women need that job, or if women do that job, they need to be paid more. That's not really a solution to these kinds of problems. What it does is it brings women into the misery of wage slavery, of alienated labor, and makes them unhappy too, and means that they can't engage in motherhood or child rearing in a way that would be possible if they didn't have to go off to work.
If they didn't need all that extra money.
Well, it's a competition. I mean, the thing is that women in the workplace compete for jobs with men. This is a competitive society, and so it puts everyone at each other's throats in some kind of competition.
Indeed.
Where these are people, I think, who want to cooperate with each other. This is why our species has survived this long. It's not because of hostility. It is because of cooperation and mutual aid, to quote Kropotkin. So you have to figure out how can this kind of mutual activity occur. and how can we work together to survive rather than competing with each other, which is what you have. I mean, the kinds of jobs that men used to do have been replaced, as Shelley was saying, by robots and things like that. And so there are not as many of them. The service economy has grown massively in the last 40 years, and it has and this I will have to explain because I'm going to get some
Please do.
Noises over the phone. It has a feminine bias.
Sure.
Russell Hochschild, the sociologist from Cal, wrote a book in 82, 83. I mean, she was really ahead of the curve. By the way, famed sociologist, also had time to raise her children. Called The Managed Heart, which is about performing emotions as a necessary component of modern service labor, and that women are better able to fake niceness and kindness than men.
Performing emotions. I've never heard that concept.
She's focused mostly on, I think, what you were still allowed to call at the time stewardesses. I don't know what it's now, like airbirds. I don't know what they call them.
Performing emotions. That reminds me, Sharon Stone said women are able to fake an orgasm. Men can fake an entire relationship.
Oh!
Well, maybe
wait, I'm the misanthropist here.
And then men do this too. But can you think of when you've ever smiled at someone? I think most of the time people are smiling at me when you actually feel sort of threatened by what another person is doing or saying. Laughed at something when you were uncomfortable. Anyway, Hochschild's point, to some extent anyway, is that this is something that women are better at doing than men, and so that service work is going to privilege women over men.
Yeah, well...
Just back to this point of competition.
You'd rather see a smiling female face at a receptionist counter than in a hotel than some surly guy.
Yeah, well, we...
As if all guys are surly and all women smile, but anyway.
Higher-pitched voices as being less threatening than lower-pitched voices.
That's right.
Another thing that we're engaged in this war of all against all to try and get a smaller and smaller little bit of money by selling our time and selling our consciousness to others.
That's true.
And that is the pernicious quality of this kind of conversation, as I was saying earlier, is that the assumption is that this is something that men need to fix and that women are the victim of. But I would say the opposite. Women now have the freedom to be victimized in the same way that men have in terms of industrialization.
Well, yeah, and so much has changed. I mean, when I grew up, my dad was a professor, college professor, and his, he had a lot of space in his weekly schedule for interaction with the family. He had the whole summer off. He made enough money and had the benefits, so we all had our health care. We had a place to live, and Mom could stay home. But it's not, it's not like that now.
Can you imagine? I think some of these jihadis may be my responsibility. The logic of the parents sending their kids to a private school, because, of course, you have to house your children so that you can be a good worker. And now women have to be good workers like men used to have to be good workers, and so the children need to be warehoused. That's the fundamental. But they would sort of operate with the logic that what their children really wanted was for them to have $10,000 or $20,000 of extra disposable income a year to buy them a car.
Yeah.
They didn't want their time with their parents.
No, but yes, of course, that's not true.
I think it's really perverse. Also, it's a rationalization of that condition they're dealing with. I hear the phrase socialization, why people send their children to school, which is ridiculous. Socialization is what they need. That is absurd. One, have you looked at these people's children? I mean, we should send them to the gulag first. But you have to say that, because if you don't say that, then what you're really saying is, I warehouse my children so that I can be the best alienated corporate worker I can be.
Oh, dear.
Nobody wants to say that about themselves.
That's lovely. And you call me an misanthrope. Anyway, thank you, Charles.
We're on Crater to call?
No, it's too late for Crater to call. We're having to sign off pretty soon.
I just bumped the next show. I've got a lot more things to say.
Thank you for calling.
Bye.
You're awesome, Charles. Thank you.
And I just wanted to end with the wonderful society down in Tehuantepec, where the women are the merchants of the produce that the men grow. They grow the produce, they bring it home, the women take it to market, the men give them all the money they handle all the money, and they give men some of the money so that they don't go out and get drunk all day. Anyway, thank you everybody for calling, and thank you to all our listeners for your participation. We're here every Thursday at noon. KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk. Opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Thank you, Shelley, for taking over the board.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're welcome.
Thanks to everybody for listening and calling. Bye for now.